The cold metal walls of the detention cell reflected the dim light as Eric Donovan stared at the ceiling. 6 months had passed since that day. 6 months since he had grabbed Emperor Zax Bean by his royal collar and dragged him through the Senate halls while the representatives of 1,000 worlds watched in shocked silence. Eric rolled onto his side, the thin mattress barely cushioning his body from the hard frame beneath. The military prison on Earth was designed for comfort about as much as a spacesuit was designed for dancing. He closed his eyes, but the memories came anyway. The Emperor's smug face as he denied the deaths of billions. The evidence folder clutched in Eric's hand. The moment when something inside him simply broke. How quiet the massive Senate chamber had become when he stepped forward. The surprised gasp of the Emperor when Eric's hand closed on his elaborate collar. The sound of the Emperor's expensive boots scraping along the polished floor as Eric dragged him past every delegation. A buzz from the door interrupted his thoughts. The cell slid open, revealing 2 armed guards and a woman in a formal gray suit. "Senator Woods," Eric said, sitting up slowly. "I didn't expect visitors today." Catherine Woods waited until the guard stepped back before speaking. "Commander Donovan, or is it just Citizen Donovan now? The military hasn't officially discharged you yet, though I imagine that's just a formality." "Just Eric is fine," he said. "I don't think titles matter much when you're facing execution for dragging the most powerful being in the galaxy across a floor." The senator's lips tightened. "That's why I'm here. Your trial starts in 3 weeks, but there are people who don't want you to reach that date." Eric wasn't surprised. The Emperor and others. Your little demonstration embarrassed more than just Zax Bean. There were council members who knew what he was doing to those outer colonies. Eric stood up and paced the small cell. "Those weren't colonies, Senator. They were civilizations. 3 entire species wiped out so the Emperor could mine their worlds for resources without resistance." "I know," Catherine said quietly. "More people know now, because of what you did. But that doesn't change the fact that you broke about 50 interstellar laws. So I'll be punished while the Emperor goes back to killing." Catherine moved closer, lowering her voice. "Lisa Harrington has been busy." Eric stopped pacing. Lisa had been his second-in-command on the starship Valiant. She had tried to stop him that day, had begged him to follow proper channels. But when he handed her the evidence folder before walking toward the Emperor, she hadn't raised the alarm. "Is she okay?" he asked. "She's gathering support. The evidence you found wasn't complete, but it was enough to start with. She's building a coalition." Hope flickered in Eric's chest for the first time in months. "Will it be enough?" "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "But there's something else you should know. There was an attack yesterday on the communications hub in Denver. The official story says it was an equipment failure. And the real story: someone tried to delete the backup files of your evidence. They didn't get everything, but it means they're moving faster than we expected." Eric sat back down on the bed. "They're going to try to kill me before the trial." Catherine didn't deny it. "I've requested that you be moved to a different facility, officially for better security, unofficially to make you harder to find." "Why are you helping me, Senator? Your career would be safer if you stayed away." Catherine looked at him with tired eyes. "Because 6 months ago, when you dragged the Emperor past my seat, I saw the images on that data pad you were carrying. I saw what happened to the Xorlaxians. No political career is worth letting that happen again." She moved toward the door. "The transfer happens tomorrow. Be ready for anything." After Catherine left, Eric returned to his bed. Outside his small window, Earth's night sky showed only a few stars through the light pollution. Somewhere out there, Lisa was fighting. Somewhere, the truth was still alive. For the first time since his arrest, Eric Donovan allowed himself to feel something dangerous: hope. Lisa Harrington wiped sweat from her forehead as she studied the holographic display. The abandoned mining outpost in the asteroid belt wasn't meant for comfort. Old equipment hummed around her, repurposed to serve their needs rather than to dig for minerals. "Any progress?" asked Alan Richards. The former diplomat had joined their cause 3 months ago, bringing with him connections throughout the galaxy. Maybe, Lisa said, pointing to a cluster of data points. This shipping record doesn't match the official report. The Emperor claimed these supplies went to drop relief on Proxima B, but they actually went to his military base on the fourth moon. Ellen leaned closer, where they were building the weapons used against the Corlaxians. Exactly. Lisa pulled up another file. And here's the banking record Eric found before the incident. Money moving from mining corporations to the Emperor's private accounts right after the Sorlaxian massacre. Across the room, Samantha Kelly worked on communications equipment. The engineer had been modifying their systems to avoid detection for weeks. "We've got another encrypted message coming in," she called out. Lisa hurried over. "From our source." Samantha nodded. "Same signature as before. Someone high up in the Emperor's government is definitely feeding us information." The message decrypted slowly, revealing images that made Lisa's stomach turn. Bodies piled in massive graves. Entire cities reduced to ash. The Emperor standing over maps, pointing to targets. "This is worse than we thought," Ellen whispered. "And it proves Eric was right," Lisa said. She had spent 6 months questioning herself, wondering if she should have stopped Eric that day in the Senate. Now she knew she had done the right thing by letting him act. Heavy footsteps approached as Vex Moore entered the room. The Corlaxian resistance leader stood nearly 7 feet tall, his scaled skin reflecting the dim light. Few of his kind remained after the Emperor's attacks. "My people on Centauri report that the Emperor is not acting alone," Vex Moore said, his translated voice flat and mechanical. At least 6 council members were aware of the genocide and helped cover it up. Lisa wasn't surprised. For money, for resources, territories, and promises of technology, Vex Moore confirmed. The Emperor has made many deals to buy silence. A warning light flashed red on Samantha's console. "We've got incoming." Unidentified ship just entered the asteroid field. "Imperial scouts?" Ellen asked, already moving to shut down their main systems. "Can't tell yet," Samantha said, fingers flying over the controls. "But they're scanning this sector in a search pattern." Lisa made a quick decision. "Initiate blackout procedures. Vex Moore, get to the escape pods and prep them just in case." Everyone moved with practiced efficiency. They had drilled for this moment many times. Within minutes, the outpost appeared dead and abandoned, running on minimal emergency power. Through the viewport, Lisa watched the scout ship drifting through the asteroid field. It was unmarked, but its design suggested Imperial manufacturing. "They know someone's out here," she whispered. "They just don't know exactly where." The minutes stretched painfully as the scout ship passed closer to their hiding place. Lisa held her breath when it paused near a large asteroid barely a kilometer away. Then suddenly, the ship turned and accelerated away from the field. "They're leaving," Samantha said, checking her instruments. "But they'll be back with more ships." "Then we need to move," Lisa decided. "We've stayed here too long anyway. Pack only what we need. We leave in 6 hours." As the others rushed to prepare, Lisa turned back to the evidence they'd gathered. It was growing, becoming impossible to ignore. But would it be enough to save Eric? And even if they freed him, could anyone stop the Emperor now? She closed her eyes briefly, remembering Eric's face the moment before he grabbed the Emperor. The determined look of someone who knew they were sacrificing everything for what was right. "We won't waste what you did, Eric," she whispered to herself. "I promise." Emperor Zaxveen stood at the massive window of his palace, looking out at the capital city sprawling below. 6 months had passed since that human had dared to touch him, to drag him like common trash across the Senate floor. 6 months of rebuilding his image, calling in favors, and planning his revenge. "The broadcast is ready, Your Majesty," said an aide, bowing low. The Emperor turned, his elaborate robes shifting with the movement. "Good. And the economic reports?" 3 human colonies are already feeling the effects of our trade sanctions. New Earth is reporting food shortages. The mining colony on Europa is running out of essential supplies. A smile crossed the Emperor's face. "Excellent. Let them suffer until they turn against their own kind." The broadcast studio was prepared with perfect lighting to highlight the Emperor's features while hiding the scar on his neck, a reminder of how roughly he had been handled by Commander Donovan. Today he would address the galaxy and continue turning public opinion against the human. "Citizens of the Galactic Union," the Emperor began once the cameras activated, his voice smooth and reasonable. "Today I speak to you about the troubling rise of anti-alien sentiment among certain human factions." He spoke for 20 minutes, weaving a careful story. He described Eric Donovan as a mentally unstable extremist with a history of anti-alien prejudice. He presented carefully edited records showing Donovan's supposed instability. He never mentioned the evidence Donovan had tried to present about the genocide of 3 species. For the sake of galactic peace, the Emperor concluded, "We must recognize that one species cannot be allowed to disrupt our unity through violence and disrespect." Across the galaxy, the message played on millions of screens. On Mars Colony, Joseph Miller watched the broadcast while eating dinner with his family. "Do you think it's true?" his wife asked. "About that commander being crazy?" Joseph shrugged. "I don't know. But the sanctions are hurting us. My brother on New Earth says they're down to 1 meal a day." Outside their window, people were gathering in the streets. Some carried signs supporting Eric Donovan. Others demanded his execution to restore trade. The colony was splitting apart. In a secure military facility on Earth, Admiral Frank Morrison watched the same broadcast with a grim expression. When a junior officer entered his office, he quickly switched off the screen. "Sir," said the young officer, "the press is asking for your comments on Commander Donovan again." Morrison sighed. "Tell them what I said before. Commander Donovan violated his oath and must face consequences." After the officer left, Morrison waited 30 seconds before activating a secure communication device hidden in his desk. "Lisa, it's me. The Emperor just gave another broadcast. He's turning public opinion against Eric faster than we expected." Lisa's voice came through, distorted for security. "We've noticed. Protests on 3 colonies already." "There's more," Morrison said quietly. "They're moving Eric tomorrow. Not to the facility Senator Woods arranged. Somewhere else. An assassination attempt. Probably. I don't have details. But be ready to move. I'll send coordinates when I have them." Morrison ended the transmission and destroyed the device. He had trained Eric Donovan years ago, had seen his potential. Morrison had been shocked like everyone else when Eric dragged the Emperor across the Senate floor. But unlike many, Morrison had also seen the evidence afterward. He knew the truth. Now, as one of Earth's highest-ranking military leaders, Morrison was walking a dangerous line, publicly denouncing his former student while secretly helping the resistance. If discovered, he would face the same charges as Eric. On the Emperor's homeworld, in the Grand Palace, Zack Sveen received news that his elite guards had captured 2 suspected resistance members. "Bring them to me," the Emperor ordered, his eyes cold. "I want to question them personally about Lisa Harrington's location." The hunt was accelerating. Soon, the Emperor thought, all those who opposed him would be silenced, and the galaxy would forget the name Eric Donovan. The International Space Tribunal on Luna was packed with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Floating camera drones buzzed through the air, broadcasting the proceedings to billions of viewers. This was more than a trial. It was the biggest galactic event since Eric Donovan had dragged Emperor Zack Sveen across the Senate floor. Eric sat at the defense table, his back straight despite the weight of restraints on his wrists. His lawyer, Olivia Washington, arranged documents beside him. She was one of Earth's best attorneys, but even she had warned Eric that the case looked hopeless. "All rise for the tribunal judges," announced a court official. 7 judges entered, representing the major species of the Galactic Union. They took their seats at the elevated bench, their faces carefully neutral. "The case of the Galactic Union versus Eric Donovan will now commence," said the chief judge, a tall Andorian with silvery skin. Are both sides prepared? Prosecutor Gregory Hayes stood. The prosecution is ready, Your Honors. Olivia rose next. The defense is ready. Hayes approached the center of the court, his steps confident. Your Honors, 6 months ago, the defendant committed an unprecedented act of violence against the sovereign ruler of the Galactic Union. He violated 37 diplomatic protocols, 16 security regulations, and the most basic standards of civilized behavior. As Hayes spoke, images appeared on large screens showing Eric grabbing the Emperor and dragging him across the Senate floor. The footage had been seen countless times across the galaxy. The prosecution will prove that Commander Donovan acted with premeditation, with malice, and with complete disregard for the stability of the galactic order, Hayes continued. We ask for the maximum penalty. Olivia's defense was equally powerful. She argued that Eric had acted to prevent further genocides, that he had exhausted all official channels for presenting evidence against the Emperor. The defendant didn't act out of malice, she said, her voice steady. He acted because he saw that 3 entire civilizations had been erased from existence, and no one was listening. He acted because sometimes the only way to fight injustice is to force people to see it. By mid-afternoon, the prosecution called its first witnesses, security officers who had been present that day, Senate officials who recounted the shock and disorder that followed. Then came the most damaging testimony. A human psychologist who had never met Eric claimed that his military records showed signs of mental instability. An imperial cultural expert testified that touching the Emperor was considered an act of war in his culture. During a brief recess, Eric leaned toward Olivia. They're building a strong case. We expected that, she replied quietly. But they haven't addressed your evidence yet. That's our opening. The trial resumed with more testimony against Eric. As the day wore on, his hopes dimmed. Then, unexpectedly, the prosecution called John Martinez to the stand. Martinez was a junior communications officer who had served under Eric. He looked nervous as he took the oath. Officer Martinez, Hayes began, please tell the court about Commander Donovan's behavior in the weeks before the incident. Martinez glanced at Eric, then back at the prosecutor. He became obsessed with tracking the Emperor's movements. He collected data when he should have been focusing on his duties. Would you say he was acting rationally? Martinez paused. A long pause. Then, no, sir. I wouldn't. Hayes looked pleased. No further questions. Olivia stood for cross-examination. Officer Martinez, while serving under Commander Donovan, did you ever monitor communications from the Imperial fleet? Yes, Mom. Did you ever hear communications regarding planetary bombardments ordered by Emperor Zaxvine? Martinez's face paled. Hayes jumped up. Objection. This is beyond the scope of direct examination. I'm establishing the witness's knowledge of relevant events, Olivia argued. The chief judge considered. Overruled. The witness will answer. Martinez swallowed hard. Yes, I heard the Emperor order the bombardment of Florlax Prime. He said. He took a deep breath. He said to leave no survivors. A shocked murmur ran through the courtroom. Hayes looked stunned. Before Martinez could continue, alarms blared throughout the facility. A court official rushed in. Your Honors, we've just received word that the human research station Horizon has been attacked. Initial reports blame Sorlaxian resistance fighters. The court erupted in chaos. As guards moved to secure the room, Eric caught Olivia's eye. They both knew this was no coincidence. The surface of Proxima Centauri's fourth moon was cold and airless. Lissa Harrington's spacesuit creaked as she moved carefully across the rocky ground. Behind her, Alan Richards kept watch while Vexmore operated the scanning equipment. Are you sure this is the place? Lisa asked through the comm system. Vexmore nodded, his alien features visible through his specialized helmet. The coordinates from our source are exact. If there is evidence, it will be here. They had traveled for 3 days to reach this spot after receiving the encrypted message. Their source claimed this moon held proof of the Emperor's earliest atrocity, a massacre that had occurred before he even took the throne. "I'm getting readings," Vex Moore said, pointing to a depression about 50 meters ahead. Organic material buried beneath the surface. The three made their way to the location. What looked like a natural crater turned out to be something far more disturbing. Alan used a small excavation tool to remove the top layer of moon dust. "Oh God," he whispered as the light from his helmet illuminated what lay beneath. Bones, hundreds of bones, piled together in a mass grave. They weren't human. The structures were wrong, but they were clearly the remains of intelligent beings. Lisa activated her suit's recording system, documenting everything. "Can you identify the species?" she asked Vex Moore. The tall alien knelt beside the grave. "Telosians, a peaceful race of philosophers and artists. Their home planet was rich in rare minerals. They disappeared 20 years ago. The official record says they died from a plague." "This was no plague," Alan said grimly, pointing to marks on the bones. "These are weapon burns." Lisa moved around the grave, continuing to record. "This is it, proof of the Emperor's first genocide. And the date matches when he was still a prince. He's been doing this for decades." Back on their ship, Samantha Kelly received their transmission. "I've got everything you sent," she confirmed. "And I've made progress on the broadcast system." For weeks, Samantha had been developing technology that could override the Imperial Communications Network. If successful, they could broadcast evidence directly to every planet in the galaxy, bypassing official channels that the Emperor controlled. "How close are you?" Lisa asked. "It's ready for testing," Samantha replied. "But we'll only get one chance. Once we activate it, the Imperial techs will locate us and shut it down. Then we need all the evidence ready before we broadcast." Lisa decided. "Add what we found today to the package." A new voice joined their communication. "Lisa, it's Morrison. Eric's transport was attacked an hour ago." Lisa felt her heart stop. "Is he?" "The official report says he was killed when the transport exploded, but I have reason to believe it was staged. My sources indicate a small ship left the area right after the explosion." "The Coalition?" Lisa asked hopefully. "Possibly, or someone who wants us to think Eric is dead. Be careful, I'm being watched closely now. They suspect me." After the communication ended, Lisa stared at the stars through the ship's viewport. If Eric was truly rescued, where was he now? And if it was a trick, who was setting it? On Earth, Admiral Morrison faced a grim-faced tribunal of his own. The highest levels of Earth's military command sat in judgment. "Admiral Morrison," said General Howard, "you are accused of passing classified information to the Coalition, led by former Lieutenant Lisa Harrington. How do you plead?" Morrison stood tall. "Not guilty. We have evidence of encrypted communications from your office, communications that coincide with Coalition movements." Morrison remained silent. He had known this day might come. His career was over, but if his sacrifice bought time for Lisa and the others to expose the truth, it would be worth it. On screens across Earth and its colonies, a new government announcement played. The Coalition, led by Lisa Harrington, has been officially designated a terrorist organization. Any citizens providing aid or shelter to Coalition members will be charged with treason. Rewards are offered for information leading to their capture. The noose was tightening, but in the darkness of space, the truth was growing too large to contain. The Galactic Senate building on Alpha Centauri rose like a crystal mountain against the planet's purple sky. Inside, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered for a historic vote. Today, Emperor Zax Veen would ask for expanded military authority to deal with what he called the human terrorist threat. Lisa Harrington moved through the building's service tunnels, disguised as maintenance staff. 2 levels below her, Samantha Kelly worked on accessing the Senate's communications network. Scattered throughout the massive complex, other Coalition members were in position. Security checkpoint ahead. Alan Richards warned through their hidden comm system. 2 guards. Lisa slowed her steps. The maintenance cart she pushed contained not only tools but also the broadcast equipment they would need. If she was caught now, everything would fail. "Wait," Alan said. "Senator Woods is approaching them." Through a service grate, Lisa watched as Senator Catherine Woods engaged the guards in conversation, drawing them away from their post. Lisa hurried past, nodding silent thanks, though the senator couldn't see her. In another part of the complex, a hooded figure moved carefully through the diplomatic section. Eric Donovan was alive, though few people knew it. The explosion that supposedly killed him had been a rescue operation planned by coalition sympathizers within Earth's military. Now, changed by weeks in hiding and still recovering from injuries, Eric approached the one place he never expected to return to. But first, he had to get past Vice Admiral Peter Collins, his former friend, who commanded the security detail guarding the Senate chamber's rear entrance. Eric rounded a corner and came face to face with Peter. Both men froze. "You're supposed to be dead," Peter said quietly, his hand moving toward his weapon. "I get that a lot lately," Eric replied. Peter's eyes narrowed. "You know I have to arrest you. Before you do that, you might want to see this." Eric held out a small data chip. It contains proof that Earth is the Emperor's next target for pacification. The same kind of pacification he used on the Sorlaxians. Peter didn't take the chip. "You expect me to believe that? After everything that's happened? I expect you to look at the evidence before billions of humans die," Eric said. "That's what a good officer would do, Pete." Peter's hand still hovered near his weapon. Years of friendship battled against duty in his eyes. "How did you get this information?" "The same source who told us about the other massacres. Someone inside the Emperor's inner circle has been feeding us information. Someone who finally found their conscience." In the main Senate chamber, the Emperor addressed the assembly. His voice boomed through the speakers. "The recent attack on the research station Horizon demonstrates the growing human terrorist threat. I ask for temporary emergency powers to address this crisis." What the Emperor didn't say was that his own forces had attacked Horizon, disguised as Sorlaxian ships. The false flag operation had worked perfectly, turning many species against humans and the coalition. Lisa finally reached the central communications hub. Samantha was already there, her fingers flying over the control panel. "How long?" Lisa asked. 3 minutes to bypass their security. Then we're live," Samantha replied. "The broadcast will override every screen in the Senate and across the galaxy." Lisa activated her comm. "All teams, we're almost ready. Be prepared for resistance once we go live." Throughout the building, coalition members acknowledged. They knew that once the broadcast began, the Emperor's guards would rush to shut it down. Back at the rear entrance, Peter Collins made his decision. He took the data chip from Eric and inserted it into his personal device. As he reviewed the contents, his face paled. "This is real," he whispered. Eric nodded. "Every word. And it's just part of what we've gathered." Peter stood silent for a long moment. Then he removed his security badge and handed it to Eric. "This will get you through the back door. I can give you 5 minutes before I sound the alarm." "That might be enough," Eric said, taking the badge. "Thank you, Pete." "Don't thank me," Peter replied grimly. "If you're wrong about this, we'll both face a firing squad." As Eric moved past him toward the chamber, Peter added, "Was it worth it, Eric? Dragging the Emperor that day. Look at everything it's cost." Eric paused at the door. "Ask me when this is over." Emperor Zaxveen stood at the grand podium of the Senate chamber, his voice carrying across the vast room. "We must act now to contain this human threat. The vote before you is simple. Grant me emergency powers to protect our galactic peace." Many senators nodded in agreement. The Emperor's months of careful manipulation had worked well. Few questioned his version of events anymore. 3 levels below the main floor, Samantha Kelly's fingers worked quickly across her control panel. "Ready in 30 seconds, she whispered into her comm. Lisa watched the security monitors nervously. "Imperial guards are moving." They must suspect something. Too late to stop now, Samantha replied. She pressed the final sequence of keys. Broadcast starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Throughout the Senate chamber, every screen flickered. The Emperor's face disappeared, replaced by images that made the entire assembly gasp. Bodies of Horlaxians piled in mass graves. Imperial warships bombarding defenseless planets. And most stunning of all, the Emperor himself giving orders for these atrocities. What is this? Zaxveen shouted, his composed facade cracking. Shut it down immediately. But the images continued. The broadcast switched to the recently discovered graves on Proxima Centauri's moon. Vex Moore's voice narrated, 20 years ago, the Telosian civilization was wiped out not by disease, but by imperial order. Their only crime was living on a world rich in resources that the Empire wanted. Throughout the Senate, representatives of dozens of species watched in horror. Many had lost contact with neighboring civilizations over the years, all explained away by the Emperor as natural disasters or plagues. Now they saw the truth. The Emperor screamed at his guards, "Find the source of this broadcast and destroy it. Arrest anyone involved." Imperial troops rushed through the Senate building, weapons drawn. They converged on the communications center where Samantha worked. "They found us," she told Lisa. "But it's too late. The broadcast is running on its own now. They can't stop it." Lisa pulled Samantha away from the console. Time to move to Phase 2. Throughout the building, coalition members engaged in delaying tactics, locked doors, disabled lifts. Confusion in the security systems. They couldn't fight the Imperial Guards directly, but they could buy time for the broadcast to reach every corner of the galaxy. In the main chamber, Eric Donovan slipped quietly through a side entrance. Many gasped at seeing him. The man reported dead weeks ago. He moved toward the center of the room as the broadcast continued showing evidence of the Emperor's crimes. Zaxveen spotted him. "Seize that man," he ordered his personal guards. 4 heavily armed troops moved toward Eric, but suddenly Senator Catherine Woods stepped between them. "The Senate recognizes Commander Eric Donovan," she announced loudly, invoking an ancient right of the Assembly to hear testimony from any witness. The guards hesitated, looking to the Emperor for guidance. Zaxveen's face had turned almost purple with rage. "Ignore that outdated protocol. Arrest him now." More senators stood, joining Catherine. "The Senate will hear him," they called out, emboldened by the evidence playing on the screens. As the guards advanced anyway, chaos erupted. Senators argued, some defending the Emperor, others demanding answers about the atrocities they were seeing. The carefully maintained order of the Galactic Senate dissolved into shouting and confusion. Eric kept walking forward, eyes fixed on the Emperor. He no longer wore a uniform, had no rank or official standing, but carried himself with the same determination as on that day 6 months ago. The Emperor backed away, real fear showing in his eyes for the first time. "Stay away from me, human," he hissed. "I'm not here to drag you anywhere," Eric said calmly. "The evidence is doing that for me." On every screen, the images continued. 3 civilizations erased, billions of lives ended, and records showing the Emperor's direct orders for each massacre. From her hiding place in the upper gallery, Lisa watched as the broadcast reached its climax. Detailed plans for Earth's pacification, scheduled to begin in just 1 week. The Senate chamber fell silent as species who had turned against humanity saw what the Emperor had planned next. 3 days after the broadcast, the Senate reconvened. The Grand Chamber had been repaired following the chaos, but the political landscape of the galaxy had changed forever. Emperor Zaxveen sat not on his throne, but in a containment chair, guarded by representatives from 6 different species. His elaborate robes had been replaced by simple gray clothing. His face showed no emotion as the Senate prepared to vote. At a plain podium stood Senator Catherine Woods. The evidence presented leaves no room for doubt. Emperor Zaxveen ordered the destruction of 3 civilizations. He planned to attack Earth next, The motion before this body is to remove him from power and place him on trial for crimes against sentient beings. The voting process took less than an hour. The result was overwhelming. Only a handful of the Emperor's closest allies voted against the motion. "The Senate has spoken," announced the Chief Justice, a Rigelian whose species had nearly been wiped out in one of the Emperor's early campaigns. Zaxveen will be held on Fignus prison station until his trial begins. As guards led the former Emperor away, he passed close to Eric Donovan. Zaxveen paused, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won, human. There will be another Emperor. The system remains. Nothing changes." Eric met his gaze but said nothing. The guards continued leading Zaxveen away. Later that day, Eric stood before the Senate himself. He had been granted temporary immunity to address the assembly. The faces looking back at him were no longer hostile but curious. Some even showed respect. "6 months ago, I broke every rule we have," Eric began. "I disrespected an office. I violated diplomatic protocol. I used force against the galaxy's highest authority." The chamber was silent as he continued. "I don't ask forgiveness for what I did. I knew the consequences when I chose to act. But I ask you to remember why I did it, not because I hated the Emperor, not because I wanted power, but because billions of innocent beings have been murdered, and no one was listening." Eric looked around the vast chamber. "I am not a politician or diplomat. I'm a soldier. When I saw evidence of genocide, I acted as soldiers do, directly. Perhaps there was a better way, but there was no time for better ways." Representatives of dozens of species watched him, some nodding in understanding. "Today, I ask just one thing of this Senate. Create a system where no one ever again needs to drag a leader across these halls to make the truth heard. Create real justice that works for everyone, not just the powerful." After Eric's speech, he met with Lisa and the coalition members who had risked everything to expose the truth. They gathered in a small room off the main Senate floor. "The Senate is drafting a new galactic charter," Lisa told him. "It includes stronger protections against genocide and limits on executive power." "Will it work?" Eric asked. Lisa shrugged. "It's a start. Better than what we had." From across the room, Vexmore approached. The tall Xorlaxian bowed slightly. "My people thank you, Commander Donovan. Though we are few now, we will rebuild." Other representatives came too, survivors of attacked worlds, officials who had doubted Eric's claims, but now sought to make amends. Even Vice Admiral Collins appeared briefly, nodding respectfully to his former friend before returning to his duties. As the room cleared, Lisa remained with Eric by the window overlooking the Senate Plaza. Below, citizens from hundreds of worlds gathered in a spontaneous vigil for the victims of the Emperor's crimes. "Was it worth it?" Lisa asked quietly, echoing the question Peter Collins had asked earlier. "Everything you lost. Your career, your freedom, almost your life." Eric watched the gathering below, the thousands of small lights representing billions who now knew the truth. He thought about the day he had grabbed the Emperor's collar, the moment he had decided that some actions were worth any price. "Look down there," he said. "For the first time, the galaxy isn't watching in silence anymore." Lisa followed his gaze to the growing crowd below. "I think that's your answer." Eric nodded. It was enough.